I've been. There you go. I like it. All right, well, let's get started. We're going to talk about Ruth and Naomi today. Most of our time we're going to spend in the book of Ruth. But I wanted to give you a couple of pieces of background before we hop into that will really help us understand the time in which Ruth and Naomi's story takes place. And so we're going to let us begin with prayer. The Lord be with you. Good and loving God, we give you thanks for this day. We give you thanks for the rain, which reminds us of new life and spring and all the good things that come with it and gives us a chance to remember our baptism. We give you thanks for this time and for the witness of Ruth and Naomi and their faithfulness to each other and to you. Be with us as we study the scriptures and fill us with your wisdom and your spirit in this day. Amen. So the contextual pieces that we have to consider. The first part of the story of Ruth and Naomi takes place in Moab. And for the people who were reading, so this the period of the Judges is 1300 to 1000 BC. So it's within this 300-year period after Joshua had appointed the judges and before the monarchy began. And so during this period is when it says, in the book of Ruth, it says this is when this took place. So we have the laws here that are related to this story. The first is Numbers 25. And it's not a law per se, but it has to do with the attitude that the Israelites had toward Moab. And so in Numbers 25, it says, while Israel was staying at Shittim, the people began to have sexual relations with the women of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. Thus Israel yoked itself to Baal of Peor, and the Lord's anger was kindled against Israel. The Lord said to Moses, take all the chiefs of the people and impale them in the sun before the Lord, in order that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. And Moses said to the judges of Israel, each of you shall kill any of your people who have yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor. And so we see right off that Moab, and the women of Moab in particular, are blamed for the Israelites turning away from the God of Abraham towards Baal of Peor. Okay, so that's one piece that we need to think about in this story. The second has to do with interethnic marriage. In Deuteronomy 7, 1 through 4, interethnic marriage is outlawed in Israel because in Deuteronomy 7, verse 4, it says, for they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods. And so it didn't have anything to do with the ethnic background of folks, particularly from Moab. This is related to that incident in Numbers 25. It was more about the worship of other gods. And so that is a second piece that we need to think about. And the third piece, which will come into play in two places in this story, is in Deuteronomy 25, verses 5 and 6, which talks about the concept of levirate marriage. Levirate marriage happened in the case where a man was married to a woman, and he died, and they had no children, and his brother was then to marry her. I know, it's really weird in our modern times, right? What this did in ancient Israel was this protected the widow, and it kept the dead brother's property in the hands of the family. Property and inheritance was a really big deal in ancient Israel and in the ancient world. And that's another reason why interethnic marriage was frowned upon, because you did not want the property, and this will come into intertribal things too. You did not want the property of this tribe or this family being handed over to someone else's family. Exactly. Yes. Yep, they built it, they farmed it, they wanted to make sure all of that property, all of that livestock stayed within the family. And this goes so far as when we have the Jubilee laws in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, property is returned to folks who have lost it. And so this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we. Right. Women didn't inherit. In the biblical times, women didn't. Yep. We were considered part of the property in ancient times. And this was not just in Israel, this was in the ancient world. Marriages were business contracts. And so you wanted to marry into the best family that you could so that it was beneficial to the family. And so when we're talking like the Jubilee laws specifically and the returning of land is, let's say you lost some land to me through gambling or something like that. We had made a wager, you lost, and I took your land. I have to then, in the Jubilee year, which is the freedom year, all debts are forgiven, and I have to return your land back to you so that it stays in your family and in your tribe and in your lineage, okay? And so that's why levirate marriage is an important piece in this story, and we'll see where that comes into play, because this will come into play at the end of Ruth's story. Okay. Yes, absolutely. So let's hop over to the book of Ruth now that we have handled those things. And we're going to begin in Ruth chapter 1. Ruth, actually, one quick thing. Ruth is one of only 2 books in the entire Bible that are named after women. So it's Ruth and Esther get their own books. And we read in Ruth chapter 1 that in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab. He and his wife and 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. So these Elimelech and Naomi as Ephrathites, they're descendants of Joseph. Elimelech means God is my king, and Naomi means delight or delightful. This will come into play later on why I'm bringing up these names. Also, because names in the Bible tell us who a person is. And so they named their kids, and this can tell you, this is some foreshadowing. This is sick one. And Chilion means wasting away. How about that for naming your kids? Yeah. Yep. So we have the sickly one and the one who's wasting away. In verse 3, we learn Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. And this is where the interethnic marriage comes in with the Moabites. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. When they had lived there for about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. So the husband dies, one son dies, other son dies. Fun fact in your Jeopardy, Orpah is where Oprah gets her name. They just switched the P and the R. Yeah, when Oprah's parents named her, they just switched the 2 letters. I learned that from my Old Testament professor in seminary. So that's kind of fun. So we have 3 widows, which is not a really great situation to be in. They could not inherit. They did have the land of Elimelech back in Bethlehem. And you have a Bethlehemite woman and 2 Moabite women, all widowed. And Naomi decides to go home, back to Bethlehem. She had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. So the famine has ended, and it's been 10 years. So she set out from the place where she had been living, and she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you, in the house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters. It has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." So this is where the levirate marriage comes in, and this is what Naomi is talking about here. She has no more sons to marry Orpah and Ruth to. And she recognizes that when she goes back to Bethlehem, that there is still this negative attitude towards Moabite women because of what had happened in Numbers 25. And so what she is doing is she's looking out for the future well-being of her daughters-in-law, saying, go home to your mother's house, marry again, have children, may you find security. And she's wishing them well and blessing them on their way, and recognizing that they are not, she does not want them to feel obligated to stay with her. Right. Right. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. That's a very good point. Going home may not do them very good. It will protect them from the negative attitudes towards Moabite women, but you're right, Rosa. There is no guarantee that someone else will want to marry them, because after 10 years of marriage, there are no children. And while we know that fertility requires two partners who are fertile in order to produce children, that burden in the Bible and in ancient times laid on the woman. And so it could be possible that the sick one and the one who was wasting away were unable to parent children. Yeah. Orpah means fawn. And Ruth means compassionate friend. So after Naomi has pleaded with her daughters-in-law for them to go home to their mother's home, she's hoping that regardless, there will be more hope for a future for them. Because given the attitudes toward Moabite women in Israel, they probably had a better chance of finding some security home in Moab than they would have in Bethlehem. So I think that's what her thinking is. So Orpah kisses Naomi and Ruth and then goes home. But Ruth, it says in verse 14, Ruth clung to Naomi. So Naomi said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." So she recognizes that there is a difference in who the Moabites worship and who the Israelites worship. And here, Ruth's response is a covenant. She's making a covenant with her mother-in-law. So this is what she says. It begins in verse 16. "Do not press me to leave you or turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." And so here, Ruth is doing two things. She is claiming Naomi as her family. Naomi and Naomi's family are hers. And she's also making a covenant with the God of Israel. Your God, not the God of Moab, your God will be my God. And so she is out loud, very clearly, creating a covenant with her mother-in-law and with the God of Israel. When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, And the woman said, "Is this Naomi?" And she said, "Call me no longer Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me and the Almighty has brought calamity on me?" So Naomi returned together with Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, who came back with her from the land of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. So Naomi no longer wants to be called Naomi, which means delight. She wants to be called Mara now. For she says, "The Lord has dealt bitterly with me." So she goes away full, delightful, and comes back empty, bitter. She felt that in her husband and sons having died, that the Lord has dealt harshly with her. Not particularly because something she has done, just the circumstances of her life. Yeah. So, yep. I have no idea. Yeah. But it's possible that when they were born, they are already sick and they lived longer than anyone expected them to. And so, but for the people who are reading the book of Ruth, and in the original Hebrew, or who are telling the story, hearing those two names and knowing exactly what they mean gives those context clues and some foreshadowing of what is gonna come later. And we see this. We saw this with Abraham and Sarah when they got new names. We see this here again. How important biblical names are because they describe who a person is. So we see this, even though Naomi will be continued to be called Naomi throughout the book of Ruth, we have her declaration here that she, because of her grief and the vast amount of it, she feels bitter in her heart. And so we see that take place there. And it all happens through subtle language changes.
So it seems that both of sons were, not a great help.
No. Mm-hmm.
One was wasting away and the other was a sick one.
Yep. So it doesn't surprise anyone that they died. Yep. Okay. So that's part one. The rest of this story will take place in Bethlehem. And we will meet Boaz. It is the kinship redeemer. You will notice that when we move into the next portion of Ruth, and they will continue to refer to Ruth frequently as Ruth the Moabite. So that is a reminder of who she is. It won't always happen, but it happens enough. Just don't forget. This is why this is important. In chapter 2, let's begin with verse 1. Now Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a prominent rich man of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go into the field and glean among the ears of grain, behind someone in whose sight I might find favor." She said to her, "Go, my daughter." So Ruth went. She came and gleaned in the field behind the reapers. As it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Gleaning, I did not put that in here. That's another context piece. Gleaning is part of a biblical command in Leviticus 19. 19. Yo, gleaners? This comes from here. Yeah. In Leviticus 19, 9 through 10, and this is where this is how we learn about the character of Boaz. It was commanded in Leviticus 19 that when you farmed your field, when it came time for the harvest, you were to leave the edges of your field as gleanings for the poor. So when you came in and harvest the field, it's much different now. We have all those combines and stuff. But you would go in with your sickle, and you would harvest the grain, the barley in this case, and then whatever was left on the ground and the edges of your field, you would leave for the poor to come behind you and take what they need. Yeah. Yeah, you just leave it. Yeah. And so anything that was left over, you weren't going back in and picking up everything. And this ensured that the poor not only were fed, but that they were able to come and take what they needed for their communities. And so it was not, oh, I'm better than you because I can give you this. Yeah. Yep. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yep. And so what do we learn about Boaz then? Because Boaz was a rich man, but he's leaving the gleanings for the poor. He had a heart, yeah. He was observant of the laws. And so his wealth did not get in the way of his ability to care for the poor and to observe the commandments that were left around how to care for the poor and the widow. Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. So Boaz shows up in verse 4, and he had come in from Bethlehem to the field, and he said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, "To whom does this young woman belong?" The servant who was in charge of the reapers said, "She is the Moabite who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers." So she came, and she has been on her feet from early this morning until now, without resting for even a moment. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Keep your eyes on the field that is being reaped and follow behind them. I have ordered the young men not to bother you. If you get thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn." Then she fell prostrate with her face on the ground and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your sight, and why should you take notice of me when I am a foreigner?" But Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." Then she said, "May I continue to find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, even though I am not one of your servants." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here and eat some of this bread and dip your morsel in the sour wine." So she sat beside the reapers, and he heaped up for her some parched grain. She ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she got up to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, "Let her glean even among the standing sheaves, and do not reproach her. You must also pull out some handfuls for her from the bundles, and leave them for her to glean, and not rebuke her." And so Boaz has learned, and it's become pretty much knowledge in this community, that even though Ruth is a foreigner, Ruth has come to worship the God of Israel. And Ruth has remained loyal to her mother-in-law. And so this woman, Naomi, who is older and vulnerable as a widow, has this young woman, Ruth, to care for her, who is ensuring that she is fed, who is ensuring that she has what she needs. And word of this has come to Boaz, and she finds favor in his sight because of her loyalty to the God of Israel and to her mother-in-law. And so he makes sure that in addition to just the normal gleanings, she has extra, and he's taking care of her. And what do we learn about Ruth from this? Because she's in the field gleaning all day, making sure her mother-in-law is cared for. What do we learn about her character? Yeah, she loved the Lord, and she was a good caregiver. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was true to her word. Yep. So she's living in and fulfilling the covenant that she'd made with her mother-in-law and being faithful to the God of Israel too. So we have these two, Ruth and Boaz, will become the main characters of our story from here on out. And so we have two people who are loyal, who are obedient, and who care for the people around them. Verse 17. So Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. Barley season is in the spring, March and April in Israel. She picked it up and came into town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she gleaned. She then took out and gave her what was left over after she herself had been satisfied. Her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today, and where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, "The name of the man with whom I worked today is Boaz." Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be he by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, "The man is a relative of ours, one of our nearest kin." Then Ruth the Moabite said, "He even said to me, 'Stay close by my servants until they have finished all my harvest.'" Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is better, my daughter, that you go out with his young women. Otherwise, you might be bothered in another field." So she stayed close to the young women of Boaz until the end of the barley and wheat harvests, and she lived with her mother-in-law. And so the barley harvest is in March and April, and then the wheat harvest and the winter wheat, so we'll see that down in my neck of the woods, the winter wheat's popping up now. The harvest will be late May through July. So you can see that there's a time period. It's not just a short period of time, but they have seen how faithful and loyal Ruth is because she continues to work with the young women of Boaz to make sure her mother-in-law is fed for months at a time. And the reason Naomi says for her to go out and to hang with the young women is because if they were to go into another field and glean, they may be bothered by the men. So if she was to stay with Boaz's men instead of going to hang out with the younger women, there was more of a risk for her. And in chapter 3, Naomi gets to play a little matchmaker. And this is fun. Uh-huh. Yep, absolutely. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to Ruth, "My daughter, I need to seek some security for you so that it may be well with you. Now here is our kinsman Boaz, with whose young women you have been working. See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Now wash and anoint yourself and put on your best clothes and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, go observe the place where he lies, and then go uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." She said to her, "All that you tell me, I will do." The word kinsman, or next of kin in Hebrew, can also be translated as redeemer. And so that's what you said, kinsman, redeemer. Yep. This, because he is a kinsman, we're pulling back up to this levirate marriage thing. While Boaz is not a brother of Naomi's sons, he is still a kinsman. He is still close in relation of the same tribe. And so, having a kinsman for Ruth to marry and to hopefully have children with is something that Naomi is really looking out for, so that she may have security with a husband, hopefully with children, and all of that. And so she instructs her, and it says in verse 6, Ruth went to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed. When Boaz had eaten and drunk, and he was in a contented mood, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came stealthily and uncovered his feet and laid down. This is Ruth's way, and Naomi has instructed her how to offer herself up for marriage in an honorable way. And so we're working, traditionally we think the man's going to come and offer marriage to the woman, but Naomi has taught her an honorable way of taking charge of the situation. Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to get a reputation, because then you aren't getting married ever again. It says in verse 8, at midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and there, lying at his feet, was a woman. So he goes and falls asleep and it says she was stealthy, which I think is fun. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin." He said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first. You have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask, for all the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman. But now, though it is true that I am a near kinsman, there is another kinsman more closely related than I. Remain this night, and in the morning, if he will act as next of kin or redeemer for you, good. Let him do it. If he is not willing to act as next of kin for you, then as the Lord lives, I will act as next of kin for you. Lie down until the morning." By marrying Ruth, a next of kin becomes a redeemer in that they are able to keep the land and the inheritance within the family of the dead husband of Naomi. And so Boaz, again, shows that he is an honorable man in that he recognizes that he indeed is next of kin. However, there is someone closer in relationship than he. And so recognizing that Ruth is a worthy woman and she is a good character, he is willing to honor her request and her offer of marriage, but he wants to ensure that this other relative, this closer next of kin, can have the offer as well. Because we want to keep the property, not of Naomi. It's not Naomi's property. It's Elimelech's property still, even though he's dead. Keeping the property as close to the familial line as possible. Verse 14. So Ruth lay at his feet until morning, but got up before one person could recognize another. For he said, it must not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. If she had gotten up and people had seen her coming from the threshing floor, she would have gotten a reputation and never been married to anyone ever. And so Boaz, looking out for her, wants to make sure that she's able to escape under the cover of darkness and have her reputation kept intact. Then Boaz said, bring the cloak you are wearing and hold it out. So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her back. And then he went into the city. She came to her mother-in-law, who said, how did things go with you, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, for he said, do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. She replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. So we have a other kinsman to think about in chapter 4. Again, the property is really important here. So we're just going to keep bringing that up. Chapter 4, verse 1. No sooner had Boaz gone up to the gate and sat down there than the next of kin of whom Boaz had spoken came passing by. So Boaz said, come over, friend, sit down here. And he went over and sat down. Then Boaz took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. So they sat down. He then said to the next of kin, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our kinsman Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, so that I may know. For there is no one prior to you to redeem it, and I come after you. So he said, I will redeem it. But then Boaz said, the day you acquire the field from the hand of Naomi, you are also acquiring Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead man, to maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance. So he is making clear what comes with the land and the importance of the land. At this, the next of kin said, I cannot redeem it for myself without damaging my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. So he just wanted the land. He did not want to maintain the name of the dead man that comes with it. And that is what comes with the inheriting of the land, the redeeming of the land. And so Boaz is quite shrewd in this way. He's like, here's this land. Do you want to redeem it? You get first dibs. He's like, yeah, sure. And then Boaz throws in what comes with it. Yep. And there's a big catch, you know? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. And notice how often the next of kin doesn't have a name. He's just next of kin. He's just this redeemer guy. No. He is unidentified next of kin. Or as they would call him in a movie script, man number one. And here in verse 7, they begin to explain what's going on. Now, this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, one took off a sandal and gave it to another. This was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the next of kin said to Boaz, "Acquire it for yourself," he took off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders of all the people, "Today you are witnesses that I have acquired from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth, the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, to be my wife, to maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance, in order that the name of the dead may not be cut off from his kindred and from the gate of his native place. Today you are witnesses." Then all the people who were at the gate, along with the elders, said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you produce children in Ephrathah and bestow a name in Bethlehem. And through the children that the Lord will give you by this young woman, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah." So Boaz, in redeeming the land, has continued to hold it in the name of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. That way their legacy continues on. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I love how they talk about so that their names were not cut off. Their names were not forgotten. Here, I'm just going to do this. So they're married. The people who witnessed this recognize the righteousness of Boaz and the righteousness of Ruth. And so this is a good thing. It is an honorable marriage. It is a blessing to the community. And it says in verse 13, "So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When they came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, 'Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without next of kin, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him.' Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom, and she became his nurse. The women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, 'A son has been born to Naomi.' They named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse, the father of David." Boaz, in keeping the property in his name, restores the name of Naomi, restores her stability. And so he's not just redeeming the land, he's redeeming both of these women. They both have stability, and the Lord blesses the marriage and makes Ruth the Moabite, who you were not supposed to marry because they turned people away to the Baal of Peor. Obed has Jesse. This is the problem with being left-handed. And Jesse is the father of King David, the man after God's own heart. And we will see Ruth in the Gospel of Matthew. Ruth is one of the 4 women named in the genealogy of Jesus. All 4 of the women named in the genealogy of Jesus lived through unforeseen circumstances. They were not the most desirable of women according to the culture, but God used them to become the ancestors of Jesus. And so what we see in this story is God's activity in the midst of everyday life. We see it, God present to Naomi, even though she's been through so much grief. God is present to Naomi through Ruth and Ruth's loyalty to the God of Israel. We see God at work through the gleaning ways that Ruth took care of Naomi and the ways that Boaz and the people in the community saw Ruth for who she was as a person and not from where she came. And God blessed her, and God blessed Boaz, who was also a righteous man, by making them the ancestors of King David. So it's a cool little story. And I love that while we have a lot of stories that talk about God showing up in these big, tremendous ways, here we see God in everyday life. Yeah. So let us close with prayer. God, we thank you that you show up to us in big ways and little ways that we see in our everyday lives. We thank you that through Ruth, you were there for Naomi, that you blessed Ruth and Boaz and made Ruth the Moabite, the outsider, the foreigner, into the great-grandmother of your beloved King David and the ancestor of our Jesus. Be with us and help us to see all the ways you show up for us each and every day, through conversations at tables, through phone calls and interactions that we have out in nature and with one another. Amen. Yeah. Ruth did not turn away from that. She was good to her word to the very end. With her mother-in-law, yes. That would have been a really good and close relationship.